Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Severe Takeaways here on the SevereMMA YouTube page. I am your host, E. Spencer Kite, joined as always by the young king of London town, Mr. Harry Powell. Shouts to Huxley in the back. Glad you're feeling better. Hux, we are here to discuss UFC San Antonio, which was a 13-fight card that became an 11-fight card that became a 10-fight card, which was a lovely, lovely afternoon of fighting in San Antonio, Texas, the AT&T Center, home of the San Antonio Spurs, headlined by another great bantamweight clash. Cory Sandhagen, Marlon Chito Vera. We will dive in and start there. Cory Sandhagen wins a split decision that should by no means be a split decision. We won't spend a lot of time on that at the end of this. Over Marlon Vera. A great performance. I know that watching this fight, you were geeking out. You were loving elements of it. So welcome. It's nice to see you. It's nice to be back doing this. Please tell me your thoughts.
Hello, Nell. How are you? I mean, he was fantastic, wasn't he? He was really good.
He really was. He really was.
The first sort of line that I wrote in my notes about this one was, this is how I expected this to go.
Same.
And when we're watching fighting, especially at the elite level now, there are things happening across multiple planes. There are round by round, minute by minute, exchange by exchange battles happening. But then there's sort of this ethereal overarching battle that's happening between the two corners because one set a game plan, the other set a game plan, and they're watching how those game plans are interfacing. And side by side in those corners between the 3, 4, 5, however many there are in the corner, they're referencing ideas and trying to bring things together and make changes on the fly and dictate to the fighter what they want, but obviously oscillate with the fighter as to what they're seeing, what they're feeling in the fight, what's happening, and sort of broaden and bring together this whole sort of artistry piece. And Cory Sandhagen's just fucking really good at that, isn't he? He's really, really good at it. The thing that impresses me is how, from a strategy perspective, Cory Sandhagen and his team just nailed this, like absolutely nailed it. From, we're going to go out, we're going to force Vera back behind the tram line. We know that at that point he has to make a decision about going left or right or defending the takedown. That means he's not going to sit down on his punches too much, because if he does, he doesn't exit left, he doesn't exit right. He's available down the middle. Equally, he's aware of the takedown, so we're going to utilize that. When he did utilize the takedown, he was just fantastic. The thing that I loved the most about the positions that he was favoring, and you can tell that he's got somebody like Ryan Hall in his camp sort of deciphering these positions, is he went to like a pseudo half guard where he was postured so high, but he'd reclaimed the knee line and he'd reclaimed the inside frame of Chito Vera, that a knee shield was kind of useless, but Cory was at such an angle that sitting up to an underhook would have been really, really difficult. And Cory did a great job of just stuffing Vera in the crevices of the side of the cage. And so Vera's A game from that position, we actually saw immediately.
Saw it right away, yeah. As soon as it happened, I was like, Harry's thing.
Yeah, collar tie, elbow. And there was 2 elbows that landed, and the second one,
and he cut him.
Sandhagen immediately. And yet Cory is like, oh yeah, shit, game plan.
Right, yeah, right. Posture, get tall.
Postures, get tall, land shots. And I think there was a couple of things, and again, I'm assuming here, this is just what the fight told me, and I saw a little bit of Cory Sandhagen's post-fight press conference where he's talking about Chito comes in and says, it's all about who wants to win more at this level. And Cory's like, yeah, that's cool until you meet somebody that is equally as hungry for this as you are. And then it's a question of just, do you have the skill to do this or not? And Cory was like, he doesn't. I know he doesn't because I was in there with him. And it felt to me like there's always, as I say, overarching narratives that are coming here. But it felt like Cory Sandhagen went out there and the posture control, the way he was landing shots, the way he was dictating the fight was as if he was fighting his little brother. He was trying to emasculate Chito Vera with the way that he was landing shots, the way he was taking his positions. The second and the first, it was obvious that he was throwing the takedown to be like, I know you want to set a rhythm. I know you want to set a forward pace. I know you want to land big shots. I'm not going to let you warm into this fight because I'm just going to take you down and beat you the fuck up. I'm going to keep you in this position. And whatever stuff you're doing, I'm going to deny it. And then 3 and 4, we can fuck around and we'll do some of the stuff because I know, and he said this in the press conference, I know you're going to come out harder because that's what you do. And then in the 5th, I'm just going to maul you again. And then stuff's going to happen and I'm going to walk away with a clean slate of a fight and you're going to be wondering what the fuck happened. And it's just that level. It's very hard for me to put it into words without you watching the fight and feeling the things that I feel. You just get to understand that Chito Vera is the 3rd best bantamweight in the world by the rankings. There is a chasm between Chito Vera and the upper echelon of that division. And if it doesn't show you by what Cory Sandhagen was able to do to Chito Vera over 5 rounds, I don't know what is.
The other piece of it to me that really stood out was, again, you see the adjustments and they're not big, they're not flashy, they're not showy, but the development that Cory Sandhagen has had since the 2 losses, since TJ Dillashaw, but especially since Petr Yan, where I felt that fight, he came out too quickly and was too willing to be in the pocket and engage and throw too heavy a volume that he got to a point where, not that he was tired, but he couldn't maintain Cory Sandhagen levels. Against Song Yadong, and again here, he comes out and right away, it's just, I'm gonna show you little bits of all of it, and you're just gonna be baffled. You're gonna have no clue what's coming. I can shift stances, and I don't have to reset ever. Everything is just into the next movement, into the next attack. There's no point where I back away because I need to get into an orthodox stance or a southpaw stance. I can just, if I throw a right hand and I walk forward with it, I'm in that left hand. It's a thing Israel Adesanya does exceptionally well as well. And it just seemed through those first 2 rounds and even into the 3rd that Chito Vera had no idea what to do. And now I think this can also be chalked up a little bit. Probably this is, again, don't know for sure, my interpretation. I would bet you if you asked Chito Vera how he felt in the back, he would be like, I just couldn't get warm. I couldn't get loose. Because Jason Perillo from minute 1 in the corner was like, all right, man, what's going on? Like, you got to wake up. Like, what's happening here? Because it's not as if Chito has ever been a guy that comes out and it's big volume and he's attacking and looking to get after you. But there's that meanness to Chito that even early in fights, like the Frankie Edgar fight, like the Dominic Cruz fight, where those veterans are getting ahead early, but you can see in Chito that he's still right there. There was no point in this fight where I was like, oh, Chito's still right here. Yes, he's a threat, but Cory Sandhagen isn't going to give him an opportunity to get off those threats because he's just going to stay on him this whole time. This was a masterful performance to me. This was just brilliant.
So this is where I think I'll disagree slightly. I think the meanness for Chito was there. I just think there was absolutely nowhere for him to implement it. Because if we look at the fights, Frankie Edgar, Dom Cruz, whatever, Rob Font is a volume guy. And I think this is one of the reasons why we were looking forward to this fight so much, right? Is because it really puts into perspective some of the wins that Chito has had and really what the ceiling is for somebody like Chito Vera. And the thing that we now can see with even more clarity than we could before is we analyze Rob Font and we say, okay, Rob Font is a volume fighter. Doesn't pack a huge amount of power, similar to Cory Sandhagen, doesn't pack a huge amount of power, but volume fighter, loves to box, likes to do
exclusively boxes.
But exclusively boxes, right? If we look at A game, with him and Cal, it's the same thing. It's hands and volume of hands. Well, if your volume of hands, there is always a chance for somebody to stand in the pocket, root their feet to the ground, and throw a big shot, right? Always.
Right.
You look at Frankie Edgar, who, turned 103 years old 2 days ago. Fair play to him. Thanks very much. Happy birthday, Frankie Edgar. And then you have Dom Cruz, who turned 103 and a half years old a couple of days ago. These are guys that, yes, they have veteran savvy. They have all of this stuff, but there are going to be moments. There are going to be pockets. These guys are slowing down. There are always going to be moments and pockets. And so you look at Chito Vera's performances in those, and there's a moment when that youthful exuberance can start to overwhelm and start to tip the tide, right? And that, I felt, was what we saw in those fights. Cory Sandhagen comes out and says, by the way, my friend, I'm just as young with just as much hunger. And this is the thing he was talking about, was the hunger thing. He said, all that's fine. But that erosive tide that you think is available for you just isn't going to be, because I have better strategy. I have a better tactical implementation. And you want to see footwork like Dom Cruz? No stress. Here you go. You want to see some wrestling like Frankie Edgar? No stress, my friend. Here you go. You want to see some hands like Rob Fromm? No stress, my friend. Here you go. You want to see some kicks like me? No problem. Here you go. And there's a flying knee that I'm just going to season in every 2 rounds. I'm just going to add it there, just so you know.
Just so you remember that it's here.
It's here. And I felt like the meanness was there, but what underlined the meanness for me was an air of desperation and frustration.
So that's a very, very better way to refine it. I think the meanness was forced Saturday. He had to, normally with Chito, it feels like it's just boiling. It's just simmering there. It's on a nice rolling boil in his innards. And he can just go, yeah, all right, we'll crank up the heat. I'm sick of this bastard. We're going to go. And on Saturday, it felt like it was a watched pot, and it just wouldn't get there. And you could tell from the first break that Jason Perillo knew that and was like, I got to get my guy going. Cause there was and Perillo to me is an underrated guy just overall, because he doesn't coach as many people as some of these coaches do. And we don't see him as frequently. And there was no technical, there was no strategy, it was, hey, are we here? Are you here with me? Are we okay? Okay, you're here. Great. Can we fucking go? Can we do stuff? Can we get going? And he was trying to find that way to get that demon out of Chito Vera. And it just feels like it was one of those nights where he was like, I left him in the back. Crap. And then Cory Sandhagen on top of that. Listen, even if the demon was there, Cory Sandhagen may very well dominate that fight, because as you said, this feels like, in addition to further highlighting the striations in the division, it shows just how cool this sport is from a skills, styles, abilities, matchups. We say things like styles make fights all the time. And it's just a thing that we say in passing now because it's so commonplace. This is a perfect example. And you look at Chito and Rob Font, and you look at Chito and those two veterans, and then you look at Chito with a more dynamic guy at the same age, at the same point, that has been a little bit further ahead of him already, because Cory Sandhagen has fought for the interim title, and you see what happens. And this was a brilliant fight. I adored this fight.
So this is why on the preview show, I said Cory Sandhagen is one of my favorite fighters, or my favorite fighting styles to watch.
Yes.
It's another reason why Dustin Poirier is one of my favorite fighting styles to watch. It's one of the reasons why Israel Adesanya is one of my favorite fighting styles to watch. It's because what you're watching is modern MMA flourish.
Yes.
Dan Hardy a little while ago spoke to Shawnee Podcasts, and Shawnee said something about a fighter being able to switch between southpaw and traditional, right? And orthodox, whatever. And Dan said, sooner rather than later, there's going to be no such thing as southpaw and orthodox. It's just going to be movement. And what he meant by that was Cory Sandhagen, right? Now, Cory Sandhagen is like generation one. Now, you can see a lot of Dom Cruz in the way Cory Sandhagen fights, but Cory Sandhagen's taken it to another level, another 2 or 3 levels.
And TJ Dillashaw.
And TJ Dillashaw, right? But I would say some of the resets, like TJ often comes in a zigzag line, but he's coming straight forward. When he resets on an angle. It's a lot of straight lines, but they're all in superfluous manners, and he has very different setups and whatever. Dom Cruz is like looking through a kaleidoscope with his footwork. You just can't understand the striations and the movement and the patterns and everything because they're always different. And I feel like Cory has watched that, taken that to another level, but there's going to be, and there is, I'm telling you there is, because we've seen them. There are amateur MMA fighters that we watch at the IMAFs who are doing the same thing right now at 16 years old.
Right.
So when they get to 26, 27, 30, we're going to see another level of what that means in MMA. And so the thing that I love about this fight, and I'm in some way sympathetic to Chito Vera, because he has done, and you talked about this, he has done amazingly well for himself on the skills that he has. But Cory Sandhagen is correct. Skills are what matter here. Because when you get to the upper echelon, that grit, that determination, that hunger, whatever you want to call it, is the same for all of the fighters.
Yeah.
Difference is who can put it together in the most dominant fashion. And if you can't do everything, you are going to be left behind.
Yeah. It's what we talked about on the preview show of Chito will always carry that little percentage piece, that 10% of, can he knock this guy out? Is he going to land that shot? That's always going to be present. But at that highest level, against these 5-6 people that are at the absolute apex of this division, it's, you got to be able to do more than what we've seen thus far. You've got to be, it's really, I mean, Cory Sandhagen, listen, he fought damn near perfectly, because even just in that first round, in that first takedown sequence, gets him down. And as we talked about, Chito goes right to his attack, grabs the back of the head, plants the elbow on him, hits him with another, starts the bleeding. And Cory Sandhagen goes, right, I can't be chest to chest. I've got to be up high with my head back. And then Chito starts throwing kicks that the referee didn't bother warning him about or anything. It wasn't like, hey, he's on his knees, you can't kick him in the head. Didn't even say anything. And Cory Sandhagen's looking at, I think it was Dan Mergliotta, and it's like, hey man, he's kicking me in the head. He can't do that. And Big Dan was just like, it's cool though. It's all right. You seem fine. And it's like, right, but the rules. Still.
Twice in the 5th round.
Yes.
Twice in the 5th round, Cory looks to Big Dan and says, my friend, this thing that he's doing, no. And Dan's like, huh? I was reading the paper, son.
I was walking around here. I was hanging out.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely. Always.
I saw somebody tweet something, and I've not really had the time to think about it too much, but I'd be interested in your thoughts. Somebody tweeted that Chito Vera is the Jorge Masvidal of 135. And the reason why the sort of thing that they said there is Jorge Masvidal managed to work himself into a spot of winning a fake belt on a massive pay-per-view because of his quote-unquote skills and the things that he produces. And I think his underlying point was Jorge Masvidal has far exceeded the actual skills he has in cage with his accomplishments, with the spots he's had. He's fought for the title multiple times. He had a massive fight with Nate Diaz on a BMF belt, whatever. And if you look at him skill for skill, that's not Jorge Masvidal's ceiling. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the place he is fighting for. And so I wondered what your thoughts were.
It's an interesting comparison. I think it's pretty close to apt. It's pretty, like, it's not apples to apples. It's not 10 out of 10, but it's There's 7 out of 10 there. There's 6.5 out of 10 there. I think Jorge Masvidal now today, taping on March 27th, 2023, is misremembered a little bit because of the last few performances, because we've seen him get baptized by Kamaru Usman and all of those things. Jorge Masvidal was infinitely better than people ever gave him credit for, all the way up. And like, the Joe Rogan going overboard thing is ridiculous, and we can just leave that aside. He was better than he got credit for prior to the run that kicked off in London in 2019. Was it 2019? 2018? 2019. Jesus. But now the looking at him and being like, this guy's a bum. Well, he's not a bum either. He's just 34, 35 and been through 15, 18 years of fighting and whatnot. I think Chito doesn't necessarily have the other part of what got Masvidal to where he was during that is, yeah, there you go. He's got the moxie. He's got the charisma. He's got the, like, love him or hate him as a competitor. He starts talking and he starts going. You can't help but stop and go, wait, what'd he say? Because he's got that flow to him. And he can say things that steal your interest. I don't think Chito has that. Do I think Chito can be a slightly elevated, better version than Jeremy Stevens was at featherweight for all those years? Yeah. Where he's just in that, like, as you said, he's currently ranked number 3. I think that changes a little bit here, obviously, because Cory Sandhagen was ranked number 5. He will move up. But like, we've seen Marlon Vera beat Rob Font. We've seen him beat number 7, Dominic Cruz. So then you've got the guys like Song Yadong, Pedro Munoz, Ricky Simone, Cousin Umar that are coming up. So to me, a year from now, Chito will be settled somewhere in the 5 through 10 range. He can live and thrive and have a wonderful career right there for the next 5-6 years. If he adds some stuff on, if he improves a couple of things, if we see a little more volume, can he move forward more than that? Can he have a little bit of that Masvidal moment? I mean, he was close to it here, right? If he goes out and wins this fight, he's then put together 5 straight and is in that spot where he's calling out Sean O'Malley for the rematch. So he's not far away. Again, it's a pretty solid comparison. He's missing the talking piece as well as Masvidal has it. But talent-wise, yeah, I think he's hit the upper point of where he's going to get, but he's able to thrive here for the next bunch of years.
So I might just slightly disagree on the scene with Mr. Masvidal there. I agree with what you're saying about Chito. To me,
like, you don't think Masvidal was ever quite as good? Like, fought for Strikeforce Gold, was on the cusp of a welterweight title shot going into the Damian Maia fight, which was a ridiculously close fight. All 3 rounds are a tale of 2 fights.
Yeah. So I think Masvidal gets... The first time I remember watching Masvidal was that Damian Maia fight. Right? Okay. And at the time, everyone gave him so much credit for having Maia on his back and not getting subbed. Right?
God, Jorge Masvidal's 38 years old.
Yes. I think that we should be remiss to be giving so much props to a fighter for having his back taken for large portions of a fight and being like, well done, you didn't get subbed. Now, he's still fucking Damian Maia on your back, right? Like, I get it. But this is also MMA, right? And we have to be setting the bar higher. And I think that shows us, actually, if we look back at the plaudits that Masvidal got for that performance, in what was a losing performance, right? But it goes out, has his back taken in all 3 rounds, survives for a long old time with his back taken, and everyone is clapping and cheering because he didn't get subbed. If that happens now,
there we go.
Not the same thing.
I was going to say, if we go back and watch that through today's scoring lens, is it a win for Jorge Masvidal and we're in a different place? Now, to be clear, the man captured lightning in a bottle in 2019 to get to the fill-in championship opportunity and then the full camp championship opportunity that just went awry, right? Like, they came at the wrong times, because after that Damian Maia fight, he fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and lost to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, which sort of showed us that ceiling. It showed us the actual real high point, which to me, now that we're looking at it, is similar to where Chito is. You're not going to beat the absolute elite of this division, but with the right matchups and the right string of fights and the right timing within the division, you can get a championship opportunity.
So I think that's kind of my point. I think Masvidal, especially at welterweight, which is always a stacked division, Masvidal is your 6 to 10 fight, right? What I mean by not wanting to overblow his skills, like, that's still an amazing achievement for any fighter, an amazing achievement for any fighter,
right?
But
he's not Gilbert Burns.
No, he's not Gilbert Burns. He's not Stephen Wonderboy Thompson of old. He's not Tyron Woodley of old. He's not Leon Edwards. He's not Shavkat Rakhmonov coming up. He's not Colby
Kamaru Usman. He's not.
Kamaru Usman, right?
Exactly.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
But in the same vein, I agree with you. To call him a bum is very silly, because if he goes out and gets destroyed by Kamaru Usman, cool, no problem. He goes out and loses to Wonderboy Thompson when Wonderboy Thompson was still Wonderboy Thompson, fine, no problem. But I think, to your point about Chito Vera, I feel like now, and I wrote about this in my spotlight, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute, but now is not the time you're going to see Chito Vera add things to his game. And so
that's the unfortunate part.
Chito must be comfortable in having had his shot, and maybe he gets another one, right? If all things line up, he might get another one. But I don't see him beating an Aljamain Sterling. I don't see him beating a Merab Dvalishvili. I don't see him beating a Cory Sandhagen for the second time. If they do it again, right? I don't see him beating a Piotr Jan. I don't see him beating a Sean O'Malley if they go again. And so here we are. Do you want some names?
Of course.
So it has to be Cory Sandhagen, Sean O'Malley for me.
So I agree. It's the one I want, but I also understand his logic and his explanation after the fact, beyond the post-fight interview, when he got to the back and somebody was like, hey, I thought all week we were thinking you were talking about it's going to be O'Malley. And he was like, look, it seems like the UFC having O'Malley hang out until the next title shot. And so Merab wants to stay active. I want to stay active. I think he's a tougher fight. He's a more interesting fight for me. This is the more reasonable ask, right? Like, it's an athlete understanding the game, and I am always going to appreciate that. But 100%, I want Sandhagen O'Malley.
Denied. Sandhagen for Chito Vera, it depends on what you want to do with him.
Right.
My opinion is you do Piotr Jan.
Yeah, I'm in.
You've got Chito Vera has just snapped a pretty solid winning streak. Piotr Jan is what, 1-4 in his last fight?
Last 3 straight fights.
Right? And so you do, with the UFC, you're like, okay, Chito, you want to rebuild? Here's a former champion.
Right.
Go beat him. We're right back in that
You're still in the top 5. Yeah, you're right here.
Piotr Jan, here's a dude that's going to go throw 6 shots around.
Right.
Who are you now? What do you got? What are we doing here? If Piotr Jan goes out and trucks him, well, Piotr Jan's just beaten the number 4, number 5, whatever he's going to land next week.
Right.
In the division. If Chito goes out and wins, he's just right back there. Immediately right back there. So for me, that's the fight. If not, they could bury him with somebody like Kazunumar if they wanted. But I don't really want to.
I don't think that's what they want to do, because it's a risky fight too for Kazunumar, right? There could be moments where he gets a little loose and he gets caught with something. And so I think they they bring that along steadily the way they have. I love the Petr Yan shout. We move forward because we're not talking about the scores. It wasn't a split decision. That's all that needs to be said. Move forward to the co-main event. Holly Holm defeats Yana Santos 30-26, 30-27 twice. This fell exactly what we talked about in the preview show. Holly Holm has worked for years to be a more complete fighter, to be able to grapple, to be able to wrestle, likes to implement it, wants to implement it. People hate it. We got lots of boos during the fight. It's also, this is the level of opponent she historically is able to beat without this issue. I didn't really learn a ton from this fight other than Holly Holm is still exactly who Holly Holm has always been. And Yana Santos is still who Yana Santos has always been. It's sort of just and all things remain the same kind of result and kind of fight. And so I don't know where we go from here primarily with Holly Holm.
Look, I was impressed because Holly Holm did what she needed to do to win. She dominated on the feet in the exchanges she was in. She made Yana Santos bite on feints that weren't really there. She dove in on takedowns. She had massive amounts of dominance when she was on top. Yana Santos didn't really do a great job of getting up or doing the things. Holly had moments on her back. She had a lovely crucifix. You know, she was landing shots from those positions. I would have liked to see Holly look for finishes, right? Like, yes, you can land the pot shots, you can land the whatever, you can do your damage, you can win your rounds. I have no problem with that. If that's the way you want to fight, you're landing more damage than your opponent, you're in dominant positions, that's fine. But with that amount of top control, I, as a purveyor of somebody wanting MMA to be better and moving forward, I need to see some attempted finishes here, right? Whether that's, let's just stick a few more percentiles on those elbows, those shots, whether it's when we have her back, we really try and solidify it. We got to mount a couple of times. Let's really try and lock that position down, and let's try and get to positions where we can land big damage and we can force reactions where we can look for things like submissions or whatever. So if I was to look for something for Holly Holm, it's that. But in the same vein, you can still tell that at 41 years old, she's showing us new things that she's working on. She's showing us implementations of things that she's working on in the gym. And what you do with her, the answer of what you do with her is, I mean, does anyone want to see the Nunes rematch? I'm not sure I do.
I'm not in a rush to. I think she actually hangs out at exactly this point. I think whichever one of Juliana Pena, Irene Aldana, or Raquel Pennington doesn't get a championship opportunity becomes an option, maybe save for Pennington because Holmes beat her twice, both by split decision, however, or both by decision, very close fights. I think she just is going to have to accept that the next 12 to 18 months are right here doing exactly this. So you're going to face Aldana for a second time. You're going to face Juliana Pena. You're going to face Macy Chasson. You're going to face whoever the next that puts together 2 or 3 wins to come up. If Mayra Bueno Silva beats Miesha Tate, you're going to fight her. If Miesha Tate wins that fight, you can do that rematch. She's going to have to hang out here and put together 3 or 4 more quality victories in order to get back to that championship position, because she's been there so many times and come up short so many times and nothing's changed at the top. If we get somebody new, like Juliana Pena winning the title and then retaining it would have been the best thing in the world for Holly Holm. But when Amanda Nunes took that title back, I'm sure somewhere in Albuquerque, Holly Holm was like, well, shit, because I can't beat her. We've seen me in there with her. I mean, could she maybe, now that she's further developing this wrestling and Amanda Nunes seems to be a little bit taking a step back? Maybe. But I still need 2 more wins.
I don't think you're going to need them.
Or 1 more win, at least.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to need them. I really, really don't. I think she beats Serena Aldana already, right? Beats Raquel Pennington, fine. Loses that very, very, very close decision to Ketlin Vieira. Goes out and absolutely trucks Santos, right? There was absolutely no point in that fight where I was like, oh, Santos might be rallying, or
Right.
there was no point in any of those rounds.
So give me one more fight then.
I think if I am Holly Holm, I go out there and I go to the UFC and they say, look, I'm 41. I'm not going to do this for much longer, right? Give me Juliana Pena. And if I win that, give me Amanda Nunes for the third time. I've added the wrestling. You've seen it now. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to out-wrestle Juliana Pena. She's not going to sub me from the bottom. I'm going to smash her. And then give me Nunes. I think that's that's the fight for me. The fight for me is you go Juliana Pena.
I'm 100% in.
Yep.
100% in. I think Pena is holding out to try to get a trilogy fight. I don't think it makes sense. I don't think we need it. I think you give Raquel Pennington a championship opportunity. If you don't want to give Raquel Pennington a championship opportunity, you can give Irene Aldana a championship opportunity. And then, yeah, Pena and Holm, winner gets a title shot. Sounds good to me. We move to the featherweight division. Nate Landwehr subs out Austin Lingo and then just cuts a beautiful promo. You probably didn't listen to it because you turned comms off, but Nate Landwehr just, you know, in the guns and talking about how sexy he is. Nate the Train, baby. Great personality, good performance, but very much what we talked about on the preview show of these are guys that are going to go out there, stand in the center and bang on each other. One of them's going to get finished. The other's going to get their hand raised. And there's a ceiling to how high they go. But I do think there's utility and value to a guy like Nate Landwehr in this division because he's durable. We've seen him in some of these grimy, ugly, resilient fights like the David Onama fight that makes him, to me, to use something you talked about in your spotlight, a perfect yardstick for some of these young emerging talents or some of these guys that are in the top 15 and trying to hang on to their spot in the lower third. What were your thoughts?
I actually felt a little bit sympathetic towards Mr. Lingo, if I'm honest, because going forward, he was way better with his hands than Nate Landwehr was. He has crisp combinations. He enters the pocket well. He does the things. But he has absolutely zero concept of what defensive boxing is, leaves his chin out all the time, finds himself in the pocket far, far, far too often. And against a guy like Nate Landwehr, and I think this really is the difference, is there is at the sort of lower to middle end tier of the UFC, there are guys who can rely on things like toughness and chin and a little bit of versatility and a bit of power to just find their way through situations.
Yep.
And Lingo on the feet, skill for skill, if you're just attacking each other, was the better fighter.
Right.
He was putting better combinations together. He was marking up Landwehr. He was landing his shots. And Landwehr was like, yeah, this is grand, because I know at some point you're going to find yourself in this pocket a touch too long.
And I'm going to hit you with something that changes. And
then he did. Yeah. And then it changed. And then he had the rear naked choke in before he had hooks. He had to shoot off just to a secondary short choke for a little while because he did, you know, his chest to back connection fell off slightly and then he locked it up and we were out of here. And I go back to this stubbornness, and I have a friend over in America, and he sometimes listens to the preview show. Sometimes listens to this. If you're listening, shout out to yourself, Ryan. Congratulations to Charlotte on her recent submission victory.
Hello, Ryan.
And you know, he was mentioning like I'm a snob, and he enjoys that I'm a snob with the fighting things. This performance is kind of everything to highlight that. Guys will go wild and say it was a fantastic fight and oh my God, what a fight. Was it though? Like Cory Sandhagen.
No, it was entertaining. Yeah, it was entertaining, but it was entertaining. I'd rather watch that than some of these heavyweight slogs or some of these even lower level junk balls that we get.
Sure.
Moderate your snobbery.
No, I would like to say, I'd like to profess what I'd like to see is in the next 5 years of MMA, if Nate Landwehr and Austin Lingo is the big meaty men doing big meaty men things in the middle of a main card that we have now, and all of the other fights are Cory Sandhagen-esque levels in the next 5 years, is what I'm saying. I would love that, because there is a place for that fight. There absolutely is a place, and I'm being exaggerative to make a point. It's not like I sat there with my head in my hands, like, oh, what a boring fight. It wasn't that at all. It's just that I want more for MMA, and I want more for its progression. And the more that we get those fights, the less I will see progression in comparison. Because I'm gonna fucking Chito Vera was trying to use reverse Z guard the same way that Volkanovski did, the same way that Arman Tsarukyan did. Now, Cory Sandhagen had an answer this time, but I have said it before. I have said it every single week since that fight. We do not yet understand how much that fight has caused big old waves in the MMA community. And it's going to start to seep out as we watch these higher level fighters and lower level fighters really start to put all this together. Fights like Austin Lingo and Nate Landwehr, they are fun, they are fine, but you don't see anyone at the elite level perk up and be like, well, boys, I'm taking something from that fight.
No, of course. Of course. And shouts to Chris Reeve, the great Australian New Zealand journalist, who brought up earlier in the week that Volkanovski and Makhachev really was the peak of MMA, that allowed me to shout out the young king, Harry Powell, who made the point that he makes every show, that fight changed the dynamic and is going to have lasting ripple effects. Do you have names for either of these gentlemen, or would you like to just move forward to Macy Barber?
LFA and PFL are my names for these gentlemen.
Let's move forward to Macy Barber, who is the subject of your severe spotlight this week. Gets a split decision win over Andrea Lee, 29-28, 28-29 the other way, and then 30-27. I had it 30-27 Macy Barber. Not that actually matters for anything. What about her efforts did you like that stood out to you that made her the focus of the spotlight this week?
So, generally, with the spotlight, I am looking not necessarily to highlight the best fighter on the card, not even necessarily to highlight the best performance on the card, because if it was, I'd just do Cory Sandhagen, right? But it's to highlight something
It's
of
to spotlight
interest.
something,
right? Lol. The thing.
That's the purpose of the show. That's the purpose of the piece.
It is. You're right.
Put a spotlight on an individual that gave us something to talk about.
Right. It's the spotlight on an individual, or at least something that the individual showed. Right. And the thing that I enjoyed about Macy Barber is we talked before, both before the preview show last week, but also on the preview show last week, that these type of fights are perfect for a fighter like Macy Barber. And you and I had a disagreement. And the disagreement was that she's 24 years old, and this, in my opinion, is where a fighter should be going out either at the upper echelons in female MMA especially, but the upper echelons of regional promotions or the lower tiers of a bigger promotion like a UFC or whatever, and really just experimenting with their skills, finding out what works, finding out what doesn't, fixing the holes, adding stuff, whatever. Macy Barber doesn't have that privilege. Macy Barber has a good style. She looks fine. She talks well. And in MMA in 2023, male or female, if you look the part and you talk the part and you could do a bit of the fighting, we're on a rocket sphere here. We look at Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley looked the part and talked the part and could do a bit of the fighting. He was nowhere near the level of fighter he was when he stepped in against Piotr Jan, when he fought, fucking Eddie Wine or the ghost of Eddie Wineland or whatever.
Right. Andre Sukumtath in his debut.
Right. He himself did a really good job of delaying that process and managing himself, doing the whole thing. Macy Barber has to do something similar. What we saw in this fight against Andrea Lee is a fighter that is starting to learn, right? We saw the stance switching. We saw the adherence to a game plan immediately, straight out the gate. Andrea Lee, what does she do? She likes kicks. Great. What does Macy do? Grabs it. And then she looks at her like, gotcha. And then she lands a few shots, lets the leg go. Andrea Lee does what again? Kicks. Macy catches it. Got you again, motherfucker. Does the same thing. And so already we are seeing increments in her confidence, in herself, in her stand-up, in her game. There were moments when she was taken down, in the inceptions of the takedown, that there was naivety. Andrea Lee did things to take her down that Macy Barber, when she looks back, will be horrified with herself for allowing to happen. Running into a double under situation, being off balance in some situations that allow Andrea Lee to just throw her to the ground with absolutely nothing whatsoever. When we see Macy Barber on the ground, we see that she's not just a one-trick pony. She's not we talk about this, and this isn't a disrespectful way at all. If Gillian Robertson is on top of you, there is a big old world of pain that you're in. If Gillian Roberts is on bottom, it's
perfectly fine.
And so
you're not worried.
You're not worried in the slightest. Macy Barber showed that defensively, she knew exactly what she was doing. She made sure at all times to be battling the multifaceted, multi-ranged battles. She wasn't going to give up mount. When she did give up the back, she made sure that she had to get her elbows inside so she could stand up. She didn't hang out in spots that were negative to her. When Andrea Lee was on top of her, Macy Barber was doing a really good job of negating all damage, essentially, and was doing a really good job of fighting from the bottom. Now, I wrote in the spotlight that colloquially we think of bottom position as being a losing position. And I think that's because in 98% of fights, it absolutely is usually a losing position. But if you are Chito Vera in some fights, if you are Macy Barber in this fight, you can find a way to make it work for you that you can land the significantly impactful blows. Go and ask Roman Dolidze.
If you're Jai Herbert a couple of weeks ago.
Right. And so whilst I would largely agree, if I was coaching an MMA fighter, I would like to tell them we're going to be on top for as long as we can. And if we're on bottom, we're going to work to be back on top. Fine. No problem. But Macy Barber finds a way. She's creative enough. She has the things, the tools, the tricks in her back pocket to be effective enough. And then we start to see she does the grinding. She has the elements in her back pocket that are the core fundamentals of her game. But she was able to experiment. She was able to go out there and try some new things and look at Uriah Faber, who congratulates her for certain things that they've clearly been working on and draws her back when there are other things that she's doing that he doesn't like. And that, to me, is where Macy Barber should be at 24 years old. And that, to me, was the impressive thing about this performance. Is she went out. I have absolutely no idea where we got a split decision for. I can see a 29-28 Barber. I can see a 27 Barber. I can 100% not see a 29-28 or a 30-27 lead. I can't see that in any stretch of the imagination. But I was just impressed that Macy Barber goes away with another win. 3 or 4 on the trot. Can't quite remember.
4
on the trot. And she takes something away from this fight that she can go back to the corner, go back to the camp, go back to the study room, and be horrified with some of the decisions that she made. And still,
that's the important thing. And that was the thing I mentioned in recapping it on Saturday on the website, was as good as it's getting and as good as we're seeing, there are still those pieces. There are still some decision-making elements. There are still some IQ pieces that just need to be worked on. But again, 24 turns 25 in a couple of months. Lots of time, loads of time. I also, and I said this at the outset of Macy Barber's career, I love that she's settled at a camp. I love that she is at Alpha Male and has been there for a few camps, because at the outset of her UFC career, she was bouncing around spot to spot to spot, trying to find something that, I don't know if it was trying to find something that works or trying to just get insights from a bunch of different people. This is a great team. This is a great spot for her. The only way you're going to develop that trust with coaches is to be there regularly and build that relationship. So it clearly is working. Do you have a name, or shall we go forward?
So I kind of struggled a little bit with this one because, again, I don't want to push her too far. The difficulty I have with this type of win is it's like, okay, right? She gets the win, fine. but I want to see something at a similar level, right?
Right.
I don't want to do here's a Viviane Araujo. I don't want to do here's a Lauren Murphy. I don't really want
Caitlin Chukagian.
I definitely don't want to do that, you know? Like, I was toying with the idea of a Tracy Cortez.
I'd be okay with that.
But I also I'm happy to look further down the division as well. But this is where it gets really difficult for somebody like Maycee Barber, is you go and beat an Andrea Lee
for a fourth straight victory.
It's hard to then be like, here's Molly McCann or here's
JJ Aldrich.
Or JJ Aldrich. Or like, it's really hard to do that.
Right.
I think if you want to go balls to the wall, you could do Casey O'Neill. You could do Amanda Hebash. But if it's me, I think I do a Tracy Cortez. Because it's, again, another up-and-coming prospect that will do the wrestling and will offer you a chance. If you go in, I wrote in the spotlight, Maycee Barber had conceded 4 takedowns in her career. And then 5 takedowns against Andrea Lee, who, let's be honest, it's not a takedown artist.
Right. Isn't a great wrestler. Can wrestle a little. And
so it wasn't just the takedowns either. It was some of the control positions that she found herself in.
Right.
Now, if we do the Tracy Cortez fight, we're looking at somebody who can actually do the pinning positions and can actually do I'm going to ride your hips and ride your wrists, and I'm actually going to do the takedown stuff. And so I think it gives the incentive for Maycee Barber to close the holes that we found in this fight. And that's why I liked it. But I don't know. It's hard. What do you have a name?
So I like your idea of Tracy Cortez. I wouldn't mind a remain in this position, and here's Ariane Lipski, who just got a win over JJ Aldrich that keeps you in that same sort of hovering, right? I think they're going to give her Lauren Murphy. I think they're going to give her another step up against somebody that is... Lauren Murphy feels a little bit like the Ghost of Christmas Past of Maycee Barber.
That could go really wrong, though.
I agree. I 100% agree. I think it is too much. I think any of those fighters in the top 10 right now is too much for Maycee Barber. This is a perfect example and case of this is where we need to ride a plateau for 3 fights and just stay right here. Just stay right here. And if we're going to do that, then Casey O'Neill makes a lot of sense. Tracy Cortez makes a lot of sense. We've already done the Miranda Maverick thing, so that's out of the window. Natalia Silva would make sense. I know she's booked against Miranda Maverick, but Jazz Divisius would have made sense. People in that range. But I think the name value of Maycee Barber, the attention that has been previously paid to Maycee Barber, is going to end up getting her in there with Jen Maya, Lauren Murphy, Caitlin Chukagian, someone in that range, and it could go absolutely terrible. And I don't want it to go terrible, because I would much rather we just plateau for a year and we stay at this level and we fight 3 times this year and we keep working and developing and building, because clearly there is skill, right? I always thought that the best thing that happened to Maycee Barber was she lost those 2 fights. Because then the pressure of the John Jones thing and the pressure of undefeated in the future and all of that stuff is just gone, and you can just be a 23, 24-year-old prospect that's figuring it out. She's clearly figuring it out. She just needs to be afforded. She needs to be in the female equivalent of the bantamweight division or the lightweight division, where you have this depth of talent, but it's not there at flyweight. As good as flyweight is, she's in that position where, all right, well, you've won 4 and you just beat somebody that's at 11. So now you've got to fight 7 or 8. And those are more dangerous names. Albert Duraev gets a split decision win over Chidi and Njokuani. I don't think we have to spend much time on this fight. It was I was surprised that Duraev didn't wrestle more after having success in the first round wrestling. I think you can make a case for Chito and Njokuani winning the fight, but it was our standard weekly, here's a pair of middleweights on the main card, neither of whom are going anywhere really further beyond where they are right now. And good Lord, I just wish middleweight could find like 3 people that are interesting moving forward.
Neither of them wanted to win this fight.
Yes.
It felt like both of them, if they just put their foot on the gas a touch, would have been able to not necessarily get the other person out of there or whatever, but both
cement a victory.
Just go up a gear and just take this away. Like, I scored the first round for Duraev. That was relatively simple. The other two, I'm like, I don't fucking know. Like,
right.
Both of them draw, whatever. I don't give a shit. Like, whatever. And so, yeah, I don't have names because I don't care.
Yeah, no. Yep. Perfectly fine. Neither of them threw a ton of strikes. I mean, we're looking at 45 strikes landed for Duraev, 40 for Chito and Njokuani. Like, to what you said, if either of them just goes, they could probably win this going away. Opening bout of the main card became the opening bout of the main card. Daniel Pineda choked out Tucker Lutz in the second round, a lovely little guillotine choke. He had looked for it earlier, didn't get it, understood right away, I got to let go of this, found it again midway through the second round. The takeaway for me is that Daniel Pineda at 37 years old is still a dude that I want to see on this roster, that I want to see in the position he's in this division, because he has 28 wins and 28 of them are by finish. And when he loses, it's usually by finish. And so you want to give me a experienced, entertaining, dangerous, not risk-averse fighter in the back half of a flourishing division. Sign me up all day.
I was impressed with the adjustment for the actual finish itself. He did a good job of finding the guillotine from a defensive position the first time when he went for it. And you can tell when submissions are on or worrying for a fighter because they stop addressing the hips and they start addressing the hands. Now, that's wrong, by the way. You should address the hips before you address the hands, simply because the hands around your neck are one thing, fine. But if for whatever reason he is able to close his hips towards you and bridge into you and close that gap off really, really tightly, the sub's done. And we saw that when he actually tapped, right? The first time, Lutz's posture was broken and Pineda had the guillotine and he switched from an arm into a regular high-risk guillotine. And that's dangerous, right? High-risk guillotines are super dangerous. But because he couldn't get his hips underneath him, he's not going to be able to really get an arc and a bend in the spine. And he equally hadn't thrown his legs over and whatever, and he was able to escape. But fighting the hips is going to allow you to maneuver your head inside and bring your own posture back. The second time, he sort of sits in at an angle and really locks up the high wrist. His hips are like on Tucker Lutz's chest, right? And so that's what really is determining the finish. Most fighters aren't going to tap when the hips are so far away, right? We're going to need extreme hip bending in, hip posture, hip dexterity, pushing inwards, but hip pressure is the word I'm looking for. That's what's going to really get our subs, or be the determination between what gets our subs and what's not. I thought Pineda was fine, had a slow start to the first round. Lutz caught him a fair bit. There was lots of leg kicks. It was whatever. It was two veterans fighting, right? That's what it was. Let's be honest.
I mean, Tucker Lutz isn't a veteran. He's a relatively young guy. He's a inexperienced Contender Series grad that we are continuing to see that some of these folks that have gotten these opportunities too quickly. He is not at the point that he is ready to be here. He's now lost his last 2 fights to more complete, more experienced fighters in Pat Sabatini and Daniel Pineda. This is what it is. This is what we're learning. And it's funny, right? The argument against Contender Series is that it's continuing to change what it means to be UFC caliber. But I think as we progress, it's also actually showing that still exists. And Daniel Pineda is a UFC caliber fighter. And right now, Tucker Lutz is not. Move.
The name.
Oh, I wasn't expecting this.
May I interest you in Lerone Murphy?
Surely. I would have liked that for Nate Landwehr as well.
No. Let's not do that. Okay. My argument for this is, I'm not giving a name for Nate Landwehr because who cares? Like, I'm giving a name for Daniel Pineda because Lerone Murphy, I would like to see the veteran who could do a bit of everything. Could shot.
Give him that test.
Give him that test. And then let's see what happens there. I would like to see Nathaniel Wood and Jack Shaw. We talked about this. So if you want to do Nathaniel Wood and Lerone Murphy as a bit of a storyline at some point, you could circle back to that. I got no problem. That's fine. No stress. But I feel like doing Lerone Murphy and Nathaniel Wood now is a slight step back for Lerone Murphy. And I feel like now when we go through the checklist of things before we put, a real serious number next to his name and a real serious name on a bout sheet.
I want to see a fight like this.
We need some things. There are some requirements there that we colloquially have, and a veteran test is one of them. And I feel like Daniel Pineda, similar story, similar timelines. Give me that fight.
Sounds good to me. We move to the prelims. Lucas Alexander closes out the prelims with a unanimous decision win over Steven Peterson, who then retires in the cage. A good performance from Alexander. This is really what I expected. He had a short notice debut against Joe Anderson Brito that was just like, hey, we're gonna bring you to the UFC and throw you in this lion's den. Good luck. And it went the way you would expect. He got his back taken. He got choked out in 2 minutes. This was a much better performance. He looked sharp throughout. There's still things I would like to see improved upon, but to go out there and beat a guy that's had 30 fights, that can do a bit of the everything, and you can keep him a little bit off balance and hesitant throughout, it's a good way to start your UFC wins.
Yeah, he looked to me like a UFC fighter.
Yeah.
That's the biggest compliment I can give him. He looked like a UFC fighter, looked like he belonged there. Warmed into the fight, right? The first round just wasn't really using his range as well as he should have done or could have done. But as we moved through, he started to pick apart. I've forgotten his name.
Steven Peterson.
Thank you. Started to pick apart Steven Peterson. Peterson was finding that he just wanted to throw ones and twos, big shots. And Alexander just wasn't there and outlanded him and did really, really well. I was more than happy with Lucas Alexander. No problem seeing him again. I do have a name. May I interest you in Lucas Alexander, Joshua Culibao?
You may. I would certainly enjoy it. I would certainly watch it, but I would imagine that Josh Coulibao's camp is like, nah, we're not fighting somebody that has 1 win, because we're on a 3-fight winning streak.
But I'm supposed to be matchmaking for Lucas Alexander.
I understand. So Lucas Alexander 100% is looking to chase down an opportunity like that and a fight like that. But on the other side of it, when Sean Shelby presents the name, Team Coulibao is like, nah, son, we've fought Charles Jourdain to a draw. We've earned 3 straight wins since then. We got to finish over our guy, Malsik Bagdasaryan, last time out after I was hurt. Rallied from losing a fight to win a fight. I need something better. But so I do like the fight.
I have a second name.
Okay. I love this.
So I put it because I thought you were going to say something similar. Again, I know that you don't like doing this necessarily, but what about Makwan Amirkhani? Similar timeline. He's coming off 2 losses. Fine. But
yeah, no, I'm okay with that. Give him the test.
Give him the test.
Give him a test right now. It's perfectly fine. If he passes the Amirkhani test, it gives us an idea of where he is. You got to survive 5 minutes. You get it to round 2, and you should be fine. Yeah, I like that. I'll take that. I'll take that over Coulibao. Look at you having 2 names. Move to the welterweight division. Trevin Giles defeats Preston Parsons by a split decision. All right, I'm not even gonna rack this up. Just give me what the head shakes are.
I'm just gonna read my first note. The first line of my note is, ooh, cage wrestling inside 7 seconds. Wonderful.
See,
Garbage.
and I expected there to be a note about the jab and why aren't we just using the jab more?
There
Because
is
for
no jab.
me watching the fight, and this is, I said it on the preview show, I said it on my 2 pieces last week ahead of the preview show. This is why Trevin Giles has been one of the more frustrating fighters for me to watch throughout his career, because there are things like that very nice jab that was busting up Preston Parsons, that was thrown about, I don't know, 70% not enough, if that makes sense. Like, I'd have been living, and listen, I can't throw a jab to save my life. I'm going to continue to work on it on my heavy bag down in the garage to get there. But if I can throw the jab that Trevin Giles can throw, and it is crisp, it is quick, it is lovely, I'm throwing it until he shows me that he can get past it and he can do more than wrestle forward. And yet he doesn't. And there are constant moments where he's like, now I'm going to do some other stuff and get hit and get hurt and get out wrestled. And I thought he lost the fight.
I don't give a shit.
I know.
I think the name, if we're going to do Trevin Giles, whatever.
Yep.
The name for both of them is Gabriel Bonfim.
Love it. Let's go. I'm in. I think Trevin Giles should go back up to middleweight. I don't think there's any reason for him to be cutting any of this. Like,
the thing I didn't understand, generally when you come down from a weight class, you're doing it to be the bigger guy.
This is what I mean.
Parsons was the bigger dude. What do we do?
I don't know.
Wild.
This is why. Go and hang out at middleweight. Fine, you're a little bit undersized, you're a little bit undermuscled, but like, as they said on the broadcast, prior to last weekend in London, or 2 weeks ago in London now, Trevin Giles was the only dude in the UFC to beat Roman Dolidze. So like, and listen, that was a horrific fight in terms of 0 happened. Still a victory. You got a little bit of power. You got a little bit of speed advantage on most of these dudes. I mean, we saw it at light heavyweight. He had it. I just don't get it. I don't understand. Move to the first of 2 flyweight fights that we will talk about. CJ Vergara gets a second round TKO win over your boy, Daniel Lacerda, Daniel De Silva, whatever name you want to call him, Daniel Mad Bastard, who had him on absolute skates in absolute dire straits for the first round. And then was like, oh, I'm tired. I'm really tired. I'm going to stand here and let you hit me. Let's just go home. You asked me a question when you were watching this of, so we're okay with CJ Vergara just running? Is that not a thing we can be enforcing? I mean, if we want to be sticklers, absolutely. You can warn him. You can, if you really want to, dock him a point. If he full-blown turns his back and refuses to engage, he can be disqualified. The one thing I will say in CJ Vergara's defense before I hand it over to you is that the runaway was constantly looking over his shoulder to how much distance do I have from this man to where I can get out and reset. But all of that in consideration, it is a terrible look. Just a terrible look. I don't care that you rallied to win the fight. Daniel Lacerda, Daniel De Silva, whatever his name is, has 1 round of energy in him, and you know that going in. It's a terrible look to spend the first 5 minutes getting the face beat off you and running away from your opponent.
I wrote in my notes here, and I don't know whether I'm being a killjoy or whatever. I would have had no problem in that fight being stopped a number of times in that first round. Vergara was doing enough by the rules fine. And this is where I think this fight is a good example of the thing that Mark Goddard talks about, which is when you're in there, the fighter is giving you cues as to whether they want
Agreed.
to.
Agreed.
And I understand that my own personal bias is very, very likely to be clouding my judgment here. But Vera was taking a lot of punishment in that first round. And the running and the whatever, fine, it might be you're wanting to reset, possibly. But like you said, it's a really bad look. And if Alex de Silva had had any form of cage cutting awareness whatsoever, rather than doing a Tom and Jerry and just chasing him around the fucking cage, he probably could have got Vera out of there. Because the number of times that as he caught up to Vera, he threw a left high kick or a right high kick and he caught Vera because he's fucking running away and can't see the shin coming at him. I don't know. But, I mean, this was really, really poor stuff. Really poor stuff. Because this is not what I want to see from a division like 125, right?
Right.
And we'll talk about the next fucking fight because Lord have mercy, that was horrendous as well. But I just
okay. Well, let's rope it in right now and have a close out the show talking about flyweight, which you and I both really enjoy at its highest end. So the opener is Victor Altamirano getting a unanimous decision win over Vinicius Salvador. Yes, sir.
Jake Hadley for CJ Vera. Thank you.
Oh, I was going to get to that at the.
Okay, fine. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm perfectly. Yep, that sounds like about right. I would take that. Jake Hadley, here's another victory for you. Go out and mash this fella because they're on the same timelines. Victor Altamirano, unanimous decision win, 29-28 across the board. I mean, this is a guy that has a modicum more experience and understanding beating a guy that has none. And Michael Bisping in the lead. Now I will caveat this right now of I have no idea if someone hands him a script that says we are going to compare this young man to Anderson Silva, or if Michael Bisping says, hey, this is a way for me to bring up that I fought Anderson Silva, so I'm going to make comparisons to this guy and Anderson Silva so I can circle in me fighting Anderson Silva and what that's like. But like, can we just stop with comparing one of the greatest of all time to some dude that turns up with a Ronaldo haircut in his UFC debut that didn't actually look that great on the Dana White Contender Series, who was making his UFC debut and didn't look great in it? Can we just maybe not? Can we just maybe like, because like this was one of 3 fights where Ian and I had alternating picks, and I'm throwing it out here. I got it right because I watched both of these dudes on the Contender Series and in their first couple of fights, and God love Vinicius Salvador for some of the moxie and charisma that he seems to think he has of doing the Anderson Silva go over, lean on the fence, like, come here, I'm going to come stand here and you can come throw shots. Maybe win something of consequence before you do that bullshit. Maybe be able to throw a straight right hand or a jab before you do some of this nonsense. On the other side, as you said to me in a note yesterday, Victor Altamirano is going to get kneed into oblivion at some point because, good Lord, that man dips his head way too much. This was hot, hot trash to you. Please expand.
Yeah. We mentioned there is a polar opposite between the performance that Cory Sandhagen puts out and Altamirano's performance. Now, of course, let's not be rude here. They are 2 fighters on opposite ends of a card for a reason, right?
Right.
But I spoke at the start of this and I said, look, there is a new wave of MMA coming. And when we see the new wave is going to look something like Cory Sandhagen +1. This isn't the new wave. It's not.
No. Victor Altamirano is 32 years old. He's a guy that came to MMA at 26. He has a Taekwondo background. He has done well to get to this point, But if you're expecting him to advance too much beyond this point, you're kind of hoping for too much. Do we have a name or no?
The bin. Just
Fair
give
enough.
him to Jeff Molina for no reason other than to just whack him and get him out of there.
Shouts to Jeff Molina. I hope Jeff gets to fight sometime soon. I would like to see Jeff come back. That's it. That's it for San Antonio. 10 fights was nice. Not having a fight card to get to this weekend is actually nice. We need to do more of this. We need to have more of this. Dear UFC, can we please sir, can I have some more?
If I may,
just like this.
Yeah, if I may posit, the card, we've been on a slog these last 8 weeks. There've been some, I was thinking about this in bed the other night. It feels to me like when you are watching a Lord of the Rings marathon, right? And the two pay-per-views,
which I'm incapable of doing
for this reason, right?
That's right.
The two pay-per-views are like high points of the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers. But after that, right, we all know that there's a fantastic battle scene coming in Return of the King, and it's Cory Sandhagen and Marlon Vera, right? But you also are there like,
have to get to it.
Yeah. Can this just end already? Yeah. I just want to sleep. That's what the last 8 weeks has felt like. And to be punctuated by a 10-fight card, which was a breath of fresh air in its range, right? Watching it back especially. 10 fights, great stuff. Easy enough to watch, get through, consume.
And would have been happy if it was 11. Like, it sucks that we lost Manel Cape and Alex Perez. Please, Alex Perez, figure out your health situation. Do not rush back to anything. Manel Cape, stop calling people cowards.
But I didn't miss it. I didn't go back and be like, oh, like, don't get me wrong, it would have been nice to watch the fight. It would have been great. But I wasn't clamoring at the idea of, oh, just one more fight. A 10-fight card seems wonderful to me. It would be great.
Perfect to me. Yeah.
It would be great if we could mandate for the fight night cards, we have 10-fight cards. And if you want to load them, just like you have here, load them full of the guys that you don't want to put on pay-per-views because they're not big names and they're not this and they're not that, and you want to work out some kinks and see who's good and see whatever, that's fine, no problem. And then you want to punctuate it with a Macy Barber type name, or you want to punctuate it with a Manel Cape, Alex Perez type name, that's fine. And then, you know, the whole idea, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, the whole idea of the main events of these fight night cards is they're multifaceted, but one of them is, here's a couple of guys that we just want everyone to watch over 5 rounds, actually. And that's what Cory Sandhagen and Marlon Vera was, right? They're 2 guys vying for title contention. Let's see it over 5 rounds, do the thing, and off you go. Great, no problem. No problem whatsoever. If on a pay-per-view card, you want to do 12 fights, no problem. You want to do 13 fights, we're pushing the boat. Let's do 12 fights for pay-per-view and 10 fights for fight night cards. And I think just the world would be in a better place. Now, obviously, there's a conversation about pacing and everything else there, but for covering it, for being able to prep for it, for being able to consume it, this was...
I don't even think there's conversations about pacing. Listen, the people that at this point in 2023 are still like, oh, pacing, that don't understand television windows and television deals and all of those things, can just go and run into traffic. Like, seriously, there's a window that... So we are going to, on April 8th, have the prelims for UFC 287. They're going to air on ESPN. They're going to air on TSN here in Canada. I don't know what they are on in the United Kingdom. It is 4 fights in a 2-hour window. They're using that whole 2 hours. So if you would like them to just, let's say that the opener of the prelims, a fight I know you are desperate to see, Chris Barnett and Chase Sherman, ends in 38 seconds. It's fine if you want them to run Michelle Waterson-Gomez and Luana Pinheiro right out into the cage. All we do is intro, away we go. They fight for 15 minutes. And then we run into Michael Chiesa and Li Jingliang. And then we run into Kelvin Gastelum and Chris Curtis. And we don't have any breaks. We don't have any set anything up. You're getting 60 minutes of studio time there because the pay-per-view isn't starting until 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, because that's the window. If you haven't figured that out, if you haven't come to grips with that yet, right now, I got nothing for you anymore. You're doing the complain to complain thing. You're doing the be angry to be angry thing. I'm now doing the grouchy because you're making me grouchy thing, which I would like to get away from in my life. But if you want to do 12 fights every card, we talked about it various points last week. The 14 and 15 was because we were losing 2, 3, 4 fights a card during COVID because of COVID protocols. And so we ended up with a few fights where there were 8 or 9 or 10. And it was like, Jesus, we almost lost a whole bunch of stuff. For the most part, we're not losing. And I should have gone through and looked, because we have lost a fight pretty much every card for the past 4 or 5 cards. But that just meant we went from 14 to 13. There were 15 fights in London. We didn't need 15 fights. That's too much. 12 to me feels like the sweet spot. You do a 5-fight main card, you do a 6-fight main card, whatever it is. Fight nights, they do 6-fight main cards, fine. Do 6 prelims behind it. Away we go. We don't need 13, 14, 15. That's getting to be too much.
The only thing I'll posit on that, last thing, is I agree with everything. Though,
as you should.
The London cards, though, I would argue, are slightly different.
Sure.
And the reason for that is there is a hub of European talent that often don't get pushed to the US. They don't get pushed here. They don't get pushed there. And like, I have no problem if the UFC want to do we're in London, let's do a 15, 16
This is where we get the Veronica Hardys and the Jai Herberts and the Cage Warriors alums that aren't generally making these trips to the United States.
Doing that twice a year, fine. I get it. No problem.
Yeah.
There are always going to be alterations to the rule. That's fine. No stress. But when we are, as we've already talked about, North America based for a significant portion of every year, let's just
dial it back a little bit.
Yeah.
Just 2 fights. Just cut 2 fights. That's it.
Thanks.
This is normally the point where I would say we'll be back next week to talk about, but we won't be. And as much as I enjoy this 90 minutes every week, I mean, you and I will probably sit here and talk about something because we like consistency, and this is one of the ways we talk to each other. But we don't have a fight card to talk about. And that actually feels really good. And for me, the guy that is the eternal optimist, the guy that is always pushing the 10 things I like every Thursday on the SevereMMA YouTube page, it's nice to have a week where we're not diving right in. We can do some advanced prep on 287. We can look ahead to some matchmaking and some future plans for the UFC. And we don't have to just rush past this. We can sit for a day or two and enjoy the brilliance of Cory Sandhagen, because it was brilliant. That is the show. Follow him at BJJ_Harry Powell. Go check out the Severe Spotlight, SevereMMA.com. While you're there, add a /pints and sign up for the Patreon. We are coming around to the start of the month. Saturday will be April 1st. Great time to start. Loads of great content. Go follow all of the lads, the boys from the Old Triangle did a terrific job doing comms in Dublin this past weekend. First time they've ever been in the same room together doing a show. That's really cool to see. Go check out Ian's interview with new Invicta FC champion Danny McCormick. That is up on the site. That is up on the YouTube as well. I will be back this week with something, because I can't go a week without sitting here. I don't know what it is yet. Maybe I'll talk about my favorite moments or fights or performances of the first quarter, because this brings Q1 of 2023 to a close, which feels wild that we're already here. On the whole, I've enjoyed it. We should have a lot of fun the rest of the way. For Harry, I am Spencer.